It's 10 minutes past 11 o'clock on the Greater 3UZ. I feel an arrival is imminent.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Bert. Am I late?
No, you're right on time, my love.
Well, guess who kept me up last night?
Who?
A certain little possum who's looking across this luxury desk, this broadcasting table at me now. It's Dame Edna, listeners. And I'm home, and I'm more than home when I'm in a studio with Bert Newton.
David, I thank you for that. I also thank you on behalf of Don and everybody with the show last night.
Wasn't Don lovely?
Well, you know, something I noticed last night about you, with all the success that you have enjoyed, I mean, Don Lane is basically an Australian, but he still retains an American accent, was born in America, but you seem never to be conscious of any class or any nationality. You can work with anyone.
Well, that's what I feel. I don't analyse, Bert. I haven't analysed this. I just know that I've got this gift, this ability to address such a wide range of people. If you could see my theatre audiences, there are funny little university students, dole bludgers, pensioners, every kind of person. And it's just a knack I've got, and I think if I go into it too deeply, I might lose it. But to be able to talk freely to little Don, you know, and he was a little bit nervous. I think I mentioned that on the show, but I thought adorable, and a little twinkle, and when the camera went off during the commercial breaks, he squeezed my hand in a beautiful way.
I mentioned last night very briefly, and you obviously didn't want to pursue the subject. I mean, Norm, your husband, has been in hospital now for many years, and I brought the subject of other men in your life. Now, this is something which is played very low-key in every story.
Of course it is, darling, because it naturally is, because it's not a thing you talk about, and there's nothing much to talk about. Of course there have been others. Now, please, ladies, don't misunderstand me. Don't think that I'd play hospitals with other people while my husband was in hospital. I mean, I don't mean it in that horrible physical way, you know, yucky. Oh, horrible, please, don't even lead me along that path. Not that you would, Bert.
Not so much now, but in years gone by, there's a lot of talk about yourself and your mentor, as it were, Barry Humphries.
Well, there was, and my name's been linked with Eric Pierce. My name's been linked with Norman Banks and Irving Benson. Do you remember all that scandal? Well, you probably don't.
I don't recall the Reverend Irving Benson.
Yes,
but was that strong?
There was a lot of tittle-tattle, and based on practically nothing. Once I went along to one of his pleasant Sunday afternoons, and he forgot his words a bit, and his eyes met mine, and I was just sitting in a pew, and as though there was nothing else happening, you know, he just stared at me, and I stared back at him, and there was a very long silence, and the papers made something of it.
And nothing at all?
I think there was something in truth.
But nothing at all?
Nothing whatever, no. Well, we did have afternoon tea at the Victoria Coffee Palace. That's about all.
What about the loneliness?
I think we went to Raffles and Rumpelmeyer's together.
Oh, yes. Lovely spot. What about the loneliness?
Remembers them.
The loneliness of being at the top, David.
Well, that's true, and there's not any other person, any other communicator that I could discuss that with, listeners, but Bert Newton. There are little moments, you know, when I've got everything I need in the way of material goods. I've got money. My tax lawyer said to me I didn't have to do a show. He said, you don't have to do a show of any kind. You don't need the money. I said, I have to. I've got so much to give, so much to share. But sometimes it is lonely. You know, once, not very long ago, my husband, of course, was in hospital. My mother was in a twilight home. My son, Kenny, broke his leg, and he was in hospital. My daughter, Valma, had a minor nervous breakdown. She was in hospital. She was in a psychiatric hospital. And my son, Brucey, was visiting my daughter-in-law, Joylene, who was in hospital. Every member of my family was in hospital. My bridesmaid and constant travelling companion, Madge Alsop, was having cosmetic surgery. Everyone was in Hossie except me. And I have to support them all, Bert.
Well, how do you come through it, then?
My hand is into my Oroton most of the time, dipping in, helping these people. These lame dogs.
Are they hangers-on? Are they truthful?
Well, they're family. You can't call family hangers-on, but between you and me, sometimes they are. They're called dependents. And, I mean, you look up in the dictionary under dependents, it's something that hangs on.
Dame Edna, last time when I got home, you know how much Patty thinks of you, because indeed you were instrumental in getting Patty and stuff together.
I was the fairy godmother there.
But she was watching the show last night with a girlfriend, admittedly from Adelaide, and she did make
a cup of tea.
She did make comment. Now, please don't think for a moment this is me speaking nor Patty, but she asked me, because I worked so closely with you last night, is the whole thing just an act? Are you in actual fact very hard, very calculating, and really more a member of the show business fraternity, as it were, than you let on to?
There's nothing show business about me. That's one of the things about me, and I think that's one of the things that's so gorgeous about me. It's funny, isn't it, that I can actually talk about myself as being gorgeous and not sound conceited. Think about that for a minute, listeners. You've got nothing else to think about. Heavens alive, except a beautiful cup of tea and, perhaps the first little sherry before lunch.
Why not?
But, and a little look at the last of the autumn tints, which are beautiful in the Eaglemont and Heidelberg neighbourhood, and Ivanhoe, which I've always wanted to live in and never could. But, I am a sincere person, and I don't like false show business people. I meet a lot of them. Some of them are nice, but they hug you and smooch you in a way that I've always thought was very, very false.
How do you spend most of your time? I mean, do you associate with many show business people?
I know very few. I'm not a name dropper, you see. Poor old Barbara Cartland, isn't it sad? I can't help smiling. But she's a famous novelist, darlings, but she, I'm afraid, was put behind a pillar, I think. I don't think she was too happy about it.
She's not going, is she?
Oh, she's being so childish, Bert. But I said I can't go, and do you know why I can't go? And this is what the royal family said to me. They said, and I can say this, they didn't put this on the Scrambler. This is common knowledge now. They said, why can't you go, Dame Edna? And I said, because I have an appointment with the Melbourne public. My people. And it's a family mission as much as a show business thing for me here in Melbourne now. Am I whispering too much on the microphone? I'm a little bit husky, and I don't want to sound it.
No,
Can
you're fine.
Hear me?
Look, just listening to you then, you've never forgotten your roots, have you?
No, well, they're very important to me. My Mallee roots, really. Because I was born near the Mallee. Did you know that? That's a thing I've never disclosed. So they're my Mallee roots in more ways than one. But this is the time of year when I like sitting by the fire and looking at an old Mallee root crumbling in the hearth, seeing little pictures in it. I'm a very sentimental person, practical, very pragmatic in many ways, and sentimental. As a matter of fact, one of the things I adore about Melbourne is it's the city of hospitals, isn't it? Do you ever think of that?
I suppose it is.
Some of the best hospitals in the world in Melbourne, practically there's a hospital in every corner. If it isn't, private homes are turned into hospitals as quickly as possible, if they're very nice, aren't they? You say, isn't that a lovely home, Patty, as you're driving on a Sunday afternoon? And the next day, it's a hospital, practically. It's turned into hospital. Little old ladies who lived there have bequeathed it, and it's turned into hospital, and soon it's smelling of Brussels sprouts and chloroform. But I love it too, because in Melbourne as a kiddie, I was taken to hospitals. Have you ever noticed that kiddies are taken to look over hospitals, even though they don't know an invalid? They're educated into visiting the sick and the ailing, and perhaps even the deceased.
Which is probably a very good thing, Dame Edna.
It is. I think we're very hospital conscious in Melbourne, and I think we should make it a tourism thing. I think the number plates, when we have a premier, if we ever do have a premier, it shouldn't be the garden state, it should be the hospital state.
It sounds a wonderful
or
idea.
Or the invalid state.
Yeah, why not?
And I think tourists, Japanese and Americans, though Americans are less now than little Japanese people, should be taken over the hospitals, and if they pay extra, they can see the intensive care. There could be perhaps glass walls so that they could look in.
This is not done anywhere else, is it?
Nowhere, and this would be a big tourist thing, because we have the beautiful, beautiful Aussies. Don't we? All kinds. There's just so many different kinds of illnesses, and at Fairfield, the tropical diseases, that would be very, very interesting for tourists, because it's a more colourful sort of thing.
Why hasn't somebody else thought of this?
People turning purple.
It'd be wonderful.
I think it's a thing. I mean, it's just a thought I had, and another exclusive of this show.
I want to change subject, and quite frankly, Dame Edna, I don't think you're going to be all that pleased with my change of subject, but I feel you owe something to our listeners this morning, and something to myself. In other words, people who saw last Saturday night's Parkinson program. Our special guest this morning, Dame Edna EVERAGE.
Hello.
I don't expect you to go into long detail, Dame Edna, but I feel you must say something about a subject which is very close to the hearts of many people who saw the Parkinson program last Saturday night. You're in the same stable as Sir Les Patterson. You both are managed by Barry Humphries. The performance by Sir Les Patterson on Saturday night has been criticised highly and very widely here in Australia. I feel you, as a member of the same team, you do have something to answer for, and I'd like you... Did you see the program for a start?
Well, darling, I don't see the program because I disapprove so very, very strongly. I was the first person to put a penny into Barry Humphrey's pocket. He was a rather long-haired, hippie-ish type of a person who had an undoubted talent. He did this kind of, well, I think he had a limited, rather arty-crafty audience myself. He employed me. This is all now on the record. It's history, theatre history. He employed me, he found me in a Mooney Ponds amateur production of a passion play. We're playing Mary Magdalene. He invited me to participate briefly in his shows, introducing him, and while he did some of his quick changes, I, of course, took off like a rocket. I became much richer and more famous than he, so he then decided to be my manager, and we more or less, on the whole, rub along reasonably well together still. But he took on some other people, as some of these little managers do. And there was a fashion a few years ago, do you remember Harry Miller having Dame Zara and Sir John Gorton in his stable? You know, some of these people did high-class commercials.
People away from show business.
Not exactly show business people, but it seemed that there were people who had an active political life, who may have been semi-retired, who nonetheless were public figures and needed to be managed. Needed their public relations handled. Now, such a person was Sir Les Patterson. He was given a knighthood by the outgoing Labour government, by Gough Whitlam himself, because of his cultural activities. He'd been apparently head of a lot of the grants, giving out all these grants during the Labour regime. And I must say, when I first met him, I thought rather a charming old boy, and... He'd very slightly known Norm, as a matter of fact. I think they'd crossed paths during the war in some way. But I did notice in the evenings he got a bit tired and emotional. A couple of little drinks and he got a little bit tired and emotional. He also was overweight, but he had a nice smile, a friendly sort of look. I always thought his teeth needed having something done to them. I didn't think about it again until one day Barry Humphries gave a party introducing him to me as his client. He then had the impertinence to say that Sir Leslie Patterson, because he was doing different kinds of jobs and still working a bit as a public servant, would be introducing my show in future. And I looked at the small print, and this is terrible, Bert, and I'm saying this now for the first time. I looked at the small print in my Humphreys contract, and it entitled him to do that. He could have put anyone introducing me. He could have got some tramp off the street and put them on the stage. Now, this man now, of course, has become, thanks to me again, world famous. And I might say that I feel a bit sorry for him because there's a Lady Patterson somewhere, and what a sad little woman she must be.
Yeah, just watching him on Saturday night, I mean, it's very easy to write him off just as a boozer, but obviously the man does have a problem. I mean, why would Barry retain him if it were not for some emotional reason?
Well, I think it's political. I think it is. I mean, I think it's got something to do with the, I think it might have something to do with the upper echelons of the Labour Party insisting.
Really?
I think there's money in it. I think Barry's getting... I hate them. Perhaps I could be sued for something.
Yes, perhaps we shouldn't go too...
there may be some little payment.
Well, let's just leave it at that, if you don't mind.
But it's the ocherism, you know.
Sure. Well, of course, ocherism is something which is enveloping now here in Australia and quite to the distaste of so many people.
Except that he is a real person, you see. People think he might be comedian. He is a real politician. Mind you, of course, if you listen to Parliament...
Yeah.
Of course, it's almost as bad, isn't
it? Do you believe they're real parliamentarians?
No, they're not. They're actors, a lot of them. The real Parliament is very nice. I've been. It's terrifically refined. But the Parliament is just played by actors that we hear on the wireless. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that at all.
Oh, yes, they're just actors. And again, you see, some silly person is writing ochre scripts for them.
I see,
you see,
I see. One of the performers who came out very strongly against the ocherism here in Australia is Rolf Harris. Rolf has declared... too much bonzer and too much good-o, mate. Yeah.
Always was.
Yeah.
Wasn't he? I mean, he never exploited, the Australian accent, did he, little Rolf? I mean, he's international. I mean, kangaroo could come from anywhere, couldn't it? Or a dingo, or whatever it was. His abos. Let my abos go loose. That was my favourite line of Rolf's. He wouldn't be pandering, would he, to any little sick minority when he said a thing like that?
If you'll just place on your earphones, if you would.
Oh, I will. These are beautiful slimline earphones, too. Hello.
And we'll take a call. Good morning.
Good morning, Bert.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dame Edna.
Hello, darling. What's your name?
My name's Gloria.
Gloria. Hello. That's a lovely name.
I think you're the most wonderful person I've ever spoken to. I really, really enjoy you.
Thank you, Gloria. Well, I enjoy myself, and I think that comes across.
I think you were wonderful last night on the Don Lane show.
Wasn't I, darling?
Yes, absolutely.